Good morning, everybody. Very often I make a video when the weather is rainy here in New York, which it has been this year, but not today. Today it's just wicked hot, as we used to say. So, yeah, we're inside, begging our air conditioning to continue to function. And I thought I would paint for you. And I had some ideas, something a little different conceptually that I wanted to address today that I think is interesting, of course, but that's not so important. What's important is I think it'll be useful to you. It's a realization, I think, a way of observation, a way of looking that once I began to embrace it, turned out to be incredibly useful and impactful for me to be able to improve my paintings. So I'll get to that in a second, but first, just very briefly, I want to just say thank you. Thank you to everybody. I'm still quite new to this YouTube culture, and I'm finding my way, and I've got to say I like it. It's a new, relatively functional. I think it'll get more functional as I figure out ways of streamlining and improving my content. I want to do some upgrades as far as cameras and other technical equipment, but relatively minor. What I'm really trying to do is find a good way to reach people, to help people, to offer something that you don't get everywhere else. So I think this style that I've been developing is pretty old school, pretty analog, simple, but it is by design. I want what I do to be helpful, not just flashy or cool to look at. I really want to offer useful information for people who are relatively serious about becoming better painters. And that does not mean you have to want to become a professional or a maniacal competitive painter, such as I was obsessed with being for so long, but just anything we do in life, I think obviously you want to improve, you want to do it the best you can. And what I want to do is to try to offer I hate to use the word instruction because I don't even think of myself as an instructor so much. I mean, technically, I guess I am, but I'm a painter. I'm a working artist. It's what I do all day, every day. So my teaching style in my classes and what I'm trying to emulate here on YouTube is really just a way of sharing what I've picked up along the way, which is not to say the final word. There is no final word, but just things that have helped me become a better painter or enjoy the process more. And I think just by sharing, it's a good thing. Making art can be a very quiet, solitary endeavor, which frankly suits me. I like that. But it's also good, I have discovered later in my life, it's good to talk about it, to share it, to get together with like-minded people and kick around ideas. I think ultimately a rising tide rises all boats, or whatever that saying is. I think if one of us improves, has a realization, a breakthrough, it is good for all of us. I do think that's true. So anyway, briefly, I just wanted to thank you. I'm really liking the process. I'm liking the community. My daily world, I tend to be surrounded with people a little bit more on a similar track to me, meaning obsessed, overly competitive types, professional artists who are deeply competitive, and yeah, that's sort of who I am. I like people like that. I understand that world. But what I like about the YouTube universe is I hear from all kinds of people. People who maybe make art, but in a different medium, a different way. A lot of beginners, people who are just discovering not just watercolor as a medium, but making art as a way of spending time. All we have in this world is a little time, so how we choose to spend it is important. So if you choose to spend some of it listening to me and painting with me, or in some small way because of me, that's an honor. It's a great thing. So yeah, I love the feedback. I love the comments, even the negative ones. Well, I don't love them, but I respect them. I honor them. I respect and honor your right to have any opinion. I've honestly gotten some good feedback by some people who I think really just want to be nasty, but that's okay. It can offer all of us a window into what we do and the impact it might be having. In any case, I just thank you all for the time of watching, creating, and commenting. It means a lot. So that said, I think it's time for me to talk about what is it I'm doing today. And what's this big breakthrough I referenced? It sounds like one of those YouTube title captions. How to have a breakthrough in watercolor. 3 easy steps. Oh my God, I hope I don't become that kind of poster. The 10 worst things you can do. No, please. I'm not disparaging people who make that content. Sounds like I am. I'm really not. It's just alien to me that anybody wants to think that there are 10 secrets, 10 lessons, 10 rules, any number of things you should or shouldn't do, because if I know anything about creating art, I know that we all do it differently. We all learn differently. 10 hugest mistakes in watercolor for one person, maybe the 6 or 8 or 10 best things for the next person. So I don't know that I reject that idea. I just, it's just not for me. No. Sorry, I got off track. So what I am trying to tackle today, I don't know if the word philosophically is correct, but it works as an approach, as a way to think about your work, as a way to think about making art, as a way to think about painting in general. Years ago, I worked commercially. I was an architect, but I did paint every day, all day, for many, many years. I was hired by other architects to do paintings of buildings they had designed, or developers sometimes would hire me. Things that weren't built. So I was a painter, but yeah, it was very commercial. It wasn't especially expressive. But anyway, that's another story. The point I'm trying to make is that as that kind of a painter, I began to see my subjects, because I had to pay my rent and please my clients. It trained me to observe the world in a certain way. And by that I mean I was fairly dedicated to the idea of seeing the world as a series of objects. And over the years, as I transitioned into what I'd like to think is a more proper fine artist, I started to get self-conscious about this. Because I critique my own work. I'm my own most harsh critic, of course. But I think my early work especially was very dedicated to looking at the world as a series of people, places, and things. So if I wanted to paint something, I was much too literal about what that meant. Painting something meant painting a version or a vision of, in this case, a boat. Are you really painting the boat? Is that the best you can do? So what I'm saying is what I learned over the years was to begin to understand that if you want to do a painting of a boat, for example, is it the boat you're painting, or is it the boat in context? What is it you're really seeing? What is it you're really observing? Does a boat have any meaning if you just look at a boat? Isn't a boat a little bit more compelling as a subject matter if it's sitting in water or near water, or has something to do with the idea of water, or perhaps not? That would be interesting too. The point I'm awkwardly trying to make is that nothing you look at that you might find interesting or paint-worthy would be particularly interesting or paint-worthy without its context. So going back to just thinking about buildings or traditional architecture in that way, the whole idea of a building became very different to me as a painter than it was as an architect or an architectural painter. I began to see buildings not as just simple objects, solid blocks of material, but really as only being interesting because of the space they occupy, the site upon which they sit, the air that surrounds them, the atmosphere. And you don't have to think too much more deeply to also realize that a building specifically only has interest insofar as the people that live there, or work there, or worship there, or have to interact with that building every day. So it's the context, it's the use of an object that gives that object any kind of, I think, aesthetic merit. Also, keeping on the subject of buildings, if you think about a house, yeah, you can think of it as just a solid object that takes up space, but really it's a container. It has open space within, naturally. It's a container of space. The empty rooms, the empty spaces inside are just as important as the solid envelope of the outside of that object. And because of that, a house, for example, is a collection of spaces that contain stories and narratives and history. And when you just start to think about your observed world in that way, your ability as a painter can expand because your ability to observe the world has expanded. You think of the world more as how you react to it, your experiences of the world. And then you become a little more interested in painting your experiences, your interpretations, your ideas of the world, rather than just the specifics of whatever it may happen to be you're looking at. I'm at work on a new book now, and a big theme throughout the book is that, the difference between looking and seeing. I talk about that a lot. It might sound opaque or pretentious, and I really do not mean it to. What I'm referring to is the difference between just what your eyes record and what your memory records, what emotional experiences you have when you look at things, what resonates inside you on a deeper level when you look at things. And if you concentrate on those elements as a painter, then you're beginning to paint what you see rather than just what you look at. Anyway, for me, it was a very big deal in my evolution as a painter to think about that, to realize that I'm not just recording beautiful thises or that. No, a lot of what we see, a lot of what resonates with us isn't necessarily beautiful or particularly pretty. It can be quite harsh. It can be upsetting. It can be any number of valid, legitimate emotional responses. All are valid. All can be translated into artwork. So to get real, what I'm doing today is hopefully a demonstration of that. On the face of this, it looks like a boat sitting in water. It is. Here's a reference photo. Where in the world is this? This is Cefalu, a little town in Sicily, just east of Palermo. And I just thought, I don't paint a lot of boats. I find them a little cliche and a little obvious. But I thought, as a subject for this topic, this would be ideal, or potentially ideal. The reason is because I think it affords me the opportunity to talk about the theme of what I was referencing a few minutes ago. What the real subject of this painting I want to do is it the boat that we're seeing? Yes, we see the boat. We see the sky, we see the water, the distant hills, another boat in the distance. But what is it we're seeing? Those are the things we're looking at. What are we seeing? I've spent many a happy day here, and so I can't look at these things without remembering emotional responses to those things. That's what I want to try to paint. And in a more accessible way, I want to try to paint atmosphere more than just object. I talked about trying to look at architecture as more in context, seeing a building relate to its site upon which it sits, the landscaping that may be around it, the other buildings in a city fabric perhaps that's surrounded, the sky that arches over, the atmospheric conditions, weather that may impact how you're looking at something and therefore what you're seeing, those kinds of ideas. So that's what I want to try to imbue here. So this painting will be an orchestration of things we're looking at, but ultimately it's intended to be a painting about an experience, a memory as much as anything else, and an atmospheric condition. It's evening, the light is very low. That's a bit of a challenge in watercolor, where I often do employ the white of the paper to illuminate the work, and keeping the light level quite low in this painting. I want to narrow the value range from the darkest dark will be nowhere near black, but somewhere around a 60-70% on the grayscale perhaps. And the light is minimal. There'll be little highlights here and there perhaps, but overall the lightest light in the painting is probably about a 30%, 25-30% on the grayscale. So very narrow value range. And when you realize that as a painter, you have that in your control to widen or expand that value range in your paintings. You can control the emotional response that not only you have, but hopefully your viewers have too. You can quiet a work down by narrowing the value range. You can make it louder by expanding the value range. I want to narrow it down. I want to tell a quiet, not sad or solemn story, but a story of solitude, quietness, peace, almost contentment at the end of the day, perhaps. I'm not trying to be that specific about it, but that direction. Other things I can do, narrowing the value range, limiting the amount of motion you see in a body of water is another easy tool you can employ as a painter. If you want to paint a painting that's more quiet, reduce the amount of ripples you see on the surface of the water, and then emphasize the amount of verticality, of reflectivity. Reflections will always happen in water, most always, but will certainly be more visible, stronger when the water is still. Things can reflect more easily. So I want to emphasize the vertical expression of the water. There'll be some horizontal expression, but I want to keep it minimal. All these decisions, these design choices will help me to advance the story of quietness, solitude, pleasant solitude, and contentment. Another choice is the minimization of visual elements. The reference photo in this case helps, but I could edit things out. I could take this boat out. I am taking these foreground rocks away. I am including some of these subtle lights in the distant hills, but I'm going to minimize them and play them down. A painting that has very few elements is deceptively, can be deceptively difficult. You might think it's simple, but it's not. When there's just fewer things to paint, they all have to work and work really well in tandem with everything else. But I'm willing to try it. And then lastly, I think the other consideration, the design choice, is a limited color palette. If you want to quiet the energy of your work down, use fewer colors or use stronger signifying colors. Blue, of course, is a generally accepted calming color, and it does happen to be true to the subject somewhat. But I'm going to amplify the story of blue up and do this painting not all in one tone or one shade of blue, but a range of blues, from teal toward violet, through the fuller range of blues in the middle. Probably some teal turquoise tones will find their way in here, but subtle, quiet, nothing garish, nothing too loud, nothing too bright. All of these decisions, that's the point, help advance the intention of the story, the intention of the painting. Yes, so while I was blathering, I sketched it out. There's not much to it really as far as elements. I turned this boat around, the one in the distance. I'm going to play it down, but I didn't. It's pointing out of the frame. Maybe that was okay, but I turned it this way. It's a minor choice. And then I did my best to sketch this boat. Boats are deceptively hard. They can be very hard to paint. They seem like they'd be so easy, and they're really not. I think the reason is because there's just no straight lines. Everything has all these converging curved lines. To get the architecture of them more or less correct and to make them look proportionally comfortable, it's fine. I should just leave it, but I'm going to widen this side out a bit. I think it wants a little more breathing room. I was just talking and talking while I was painting it, so I wasn't really concentrating too hard, which, frankly, is often a better way to draw or paint, to turn your critical mind off and just paint intuitively. But that said, now that I analyze it a little, it looks like it needs to be a little wider overall. Oh, there is another element, but more of a technical thing that will happen when I start painting. Modulating the edges. If you want to tell a story of a more peaceful overall experience, minimizing the amount of really crisp, hard edges will help you get there. So in this case, also because it's low light, it's early evening, the end of day, I'm going to soften the line in the distance to make it a little less obvious, more obscure. I'm going to really play up the obscurity of this other layer of trees and houses, etc. But the point is, that's another thing you have at your disposal as a painter. What kind of edges you choose. If you want your painting to emphasize softness, quietness, yeah, that feeling at the end of the day when you look out in the distance and the light is low, everything's not quite as in focus, obviously, as it might be on a bright sunny day or at noon. They're a little harder to see, they're a little harder to discern. I find that quite pleasant, and I want to play up that effect as much as I can. Yeah, I spent a little time tweaking my boat, but I think it looks better. Yeah, again, I'm not a huge fan of, I shouldn't say that. I don't know. I just think there are so many paintings, especially in watercolor, of boats. It doesn't mean there can't be good ones. I used to avoid painting certain places or iconic buildings, things like the Eiffel Tower or the Empire State Building. But I've changed. I don't say that you shouldn't paint those things, but if you're going to, do your best to put your own very personal spin on them. Make them your own, as they say. Otherwise, yeah, they risk looking pretty redundant or cliche. So we'll see. This isn't really a painting of a boat. This guy is in the foreground, so he's going to get a little bit more attention in some ways. But again, my goal for this painting is overall to paint an atmosphere and an emotional experience. So there we go. So I'm going to start in and do one large wash overall from the back to the front, or the top to the bottom. I'm working on a slightly more increased angle than I would normally do because I want to emphasize or assist these different tones to run together a little bit more organically or quickly than I might otherwise choose to do. Spending a minute here, dropping in just a hint of some of these buildings in the background. I want to be pretty gestural and abstract about this, so I don't want to make a big deal. Just a hint. I think I'm going to just let my brush flesh out those details as required when I start painting. But, okay, so there's the line drawing, there's the setup and the intention. Now all I have to do is paint it. How hard can that be? So, thanks for listening so far. I'm going to stop the video and set up my palette, get some additional water and clean my brushes, and I'll be right back. This will be a video in 2 parts.